Okay, so we've looked at early Italian Renaissance sculpture. We saw the doors, we saw Donatello's work and Verrocchio's work. Let's look at some architecture. Yeah? Here. Here we are looking at Bartolomeo's design for the Palazzo Medici. Now, this view that we're looking at, it's a little awkward because it's still in its original location inside of the city of Florence. It's located along one of the major streets. It's just north of the cathedral. And we're standing here at this intersection looking at it. So that's why we have this kind of sharp angled view. But we're going to look at Bartolomeo's Palazzo Medici because it is influential to later palace design and building design. And we focus in on palace construction in Florence in the early Italian Renaissance because there is a boom in construction. This is due to political and economic stability in Florence. And remember that Florence is a republic, and the republic, or the representative body, are going to be these families like the Medici family. And these families live in the city of Florence in these palaces. A palazzo is a city palace. Now, of course, they're going to have other houses and properties outside of the main city center, but as a collective, they want to be a part of the city and its system of government, and so they're going to set up houses or palazzos, these city palaces, inside of the city. So here we are looking at the Medici's palazzo. Now, it's important to recognize the function of a palazzo at this time. It's not just a place where you sleep. A palazzo has three major functions. First, your palazzo is where you do sleep, where you host parties, dinner parties, elaborate balls, small get-togethers, where you meet with other influential people. So it is your living quarters. Second function of a palazzo, this is where you conduct business. If your business is international banking or you are a cloth merchant, your contracts with your tradesmen are going to be negotiated, signed, paid for in your palazzo. So think of this as your business center. And the third function of a palazzo is this is also your warehouse for your business. This is where you're going to keep and store your materials, your goods. It's not like how in modern times, often you work somewhere, you live somewhere else, and then the materials are stored elsewhere, three separate locations. Instead, what was the common way of conducting business was that you would live and you would work and you would keep your business in one spot. And a palazzo serves those three functions. You live and sleep there, you work and conduct your business there, and you store your business there. So like if you were a cloth merchant, this is where you'd store your big bolts of cloth. Okay, so when we look at the Palazzo Medici, we need to think of it as serving those three functions. What Bartolomeo does is he presents these three functions on the exterior or the outside of the palazzo. How so? Okay, well, here we are, and we are in the heart of Florence. Now, at the time of the construction for the Palazzo Medici, the Medici had been on the outs. They had been unpopular because they had tried to take over power of the Republic and basically in exile. They wanted to come back but keep a lower profile. So they hired Bartolomeo rather than hiring a big well-known architect like Brunelleschi. They hire a kind of unknown architect, Bartolomeo, who, by the way, was besties with Donatello. I know, all these names. Okay. The Medicis, they got in trouble with the other families of Florence because they were getting too powerful. They got ousted. Now, 20 years later, they want to come back in. And they want to establish themselves inside Florence, but keep a lower, more conservative profile. So they hire a more conservative architect, Bartolomeo, who was best friends with Donatello. And Bartolomeo presents them with this. Now, notice here I've put original structure, because what we're looking at here is how Bartolomeo intended the palazzo to appear. Notice I've been calling it the Palazzo Medici, but your title says the Palazzo Medici-Riccardi. What's the Riccardi? Okay. We are hanging out at this palazzo when it is owned by the Medicis. However, in the 1700s, the Medicis will sell it to another family, the Riccardi family, and they're going to make additions. They're going to change the palazzo, and therefore they're going to change the exterior appearance of the palazzo. So while this is what it looked like when the Medicis lived here, it now, after being owned by the Riccardi family, looks different. They've added on to this side of the palace, and it's thrown off the balance. Okay, we'll get to that in a little bit. So here, this is a drawing of what Bartolomeo's Palazzo Medici looked like before the Riccardis bought it. We see 3 central doors, and these doors during business hours would most likely have been open to the public on street level, and there would be guards at these doors. If you had business with the Medici family, you would then be presented at these doors. You'd say, hey, I'm this guy from this family, and I'm here to have a talk with the Medicis. And then you'd either be let in or pushed out onto the street. No. You would then come into a courtyard. Here's the courtyard. And from here, you would be met by a representative of the Medici family. Perhaps you'd go up to the 2nd level. The 2nd level is where business would be conducted, or the 3rd level. The 3rd level is where the living quarters were situated. So do you see what we have here? We have our 3 levels. We have street level, we have a 2nd level for business, and then a 3rd level for living quarters. Now, along the sides of the street level courtyard are the storage rooms, the storehouses. Got it? Bartolomeo is dividing up the space on the exterior using architectural elements that we're going to look at in more detail. First, notice the lowest, or the street level, has these really heavy, rough hewn bricks. These big chunky blocks look like they're unfinished, but instead this is intentional, and this type of block is called rustication, and that's your vocabulary term. Rustication, to give a rustic appearance by roughing the surface. So we see here a rustic or rough surface on that ground level. And then the 2nd and 3rd level do not have that same rough appearance. Instead, we would call that dressed masonry. So here's another vocabulary term. Dressed masonry, stone blocks with shaped and smooth faces for a perfect fit. Do you see that? Here's another view of it. So Bartolomeo has created this rustication on the lower level, and then smooth, finished stonework on the 2nd level, and then it's so fine and finished on the 3rd level that you can't even see the seams of the stonework, right? So we have rustication and dressed masonry. Now I bring these to your attention because I want you to think about the function of a palazzo. The lower level is where you're going to keep all of your storage materials. The 2nd level is for business, and the 3rd is for living. What Bartolomeo has presented us with on the exterior is the function of a palazzo. The heavy rustic stonework is big and bulky and intimidating. There aren't a lot of windows on that lowest level, but that makes sense. It's street level, and this is where all the goods are stored. And so it's almost fortified like in a heavy vault or bank. The Medici, they are bankers, right? So the goods are stored on street level, but good luck breaking in. There's very few windows, and that masonry is big and heavy. Also, it's going to be a sense of armor, like you cannot get in here. Yes, we are in the middle of the city, but you cannot attack us. Now remember, the Medici had gotten in trouble. They had already been kicked out of Florence. So think of that rusticated first or ground level as a way of creating a thicker armor or protection for their goods inside and for the family inside. The second level, dressed masonry. It's a finer, more detailed stonework. Business. Business requires finesse. Rather than just the simple exchange of goods, business is about negotiation, diplomacy, compromise. There's the art of business, and the more refined dressed masonry on that second level reflects the business that happens inside. And then the third level, the living quarters. It's not just a place where you sleep, but it's also a place where you eat. It's where you hear poetry. It's where you sing songs. It's where you play music. It's where you have balls and galas and you dance and you flirt. It's the finer elegance and beauty of life. And look at the masonry. It's so refined that it's difficult to find its edges. Look at the windows. They're big and open and they let in light. They don't have to hide from the dirt and the noise on the ground level. So what Bartolomeo does is he shows us the three functions in the three levels of the palazzo. He literally outlines these levels using a string course. And this is your next vocabulary term. A string course, a raised horizontal molding or band in masonry. So you see how he's created these levels and he has this outcrop of stonework that further defines the three levels and therefore the three functions of a palazzo. Nice, right? String course. Now let's look at it. Let's stand over here and we're going to look at it from the front of the palazzo. Now here we are looking at it, and I want to call your attention to the top, the very top, or the roof line of the palazzo. What we have here is called the cornice. The cornice is the horizontal decoration that crowns an architectural element. I know, it's a lot of vocabulary terms, but heads up, architects love vocabulary. They have a name for everything. I'm just showing you a few of these to discuss this palace. So the cornice is the cap or the crown. Get it? Cornice, crown, same word. And it's on top, acting not only as a crown, but as this very heavy horizontal band on top, resting on top of the palace. And I want you to be aware, remember I said that the Riccardi family bought this and added on to it? This is the portion of the palace that they added onto. They added all of this. So when we look at the structure today, it seems extremely long, but I need you to use your imagination. Remove this portion of the palace. This was at the time the back garden, or the side garden, excuse me. And this was the actual palace itself. Now, keeping that in mind, when we look at the cornice, it says a horizontal decoration. It is this very heavy horizontal line. And Bartolomeo creates this exaggerated cornice as a way to balance the vertical rise of the structure. The cornice, it stretches out far or extends out far over the top of the building. Here's another view of it. You move out of the way. So you see that? It does reach out or extend out over the structure and does emphasize this long band or line at the top of the building. And what it's doing is it's creating a counterbalance. I'm going to put myself right here over what the Riccardis did. Just remove this part of the palazzo. What Bartolomeo's cornice does is it offsets the rise of the structure. If you notice, our eye is lifted level by level by level. The rustic, and then a little bit lighter, and then the lightest. And visually, if we didn't have the cornice there, let's just pretend. Let me move or erase the cornice. 1 second. Here. If we didn't have the cornice, the building would seem lighter and lighter and lighter, almost like it was going to float away. But the cornice helps to ground the structure. What I mean by ground is that horizontal band keeps the visual elements from floating up and out. It creates a more stable, more grounded palace. Now remember, this is the people, this is for the Medici family, and they want to seem grounded and invested in Florence. And so the cornice, which visually stabilizes the palazzo, it's another way of showing a balanced and in control Medici family who live in this palace. Now I keep on saying the word balance, balance, balance. This is going to be a characteristic of the Renaissance, and you need to write this down. In addition to this. Here, this is a quick little cheat sheet for our characteristics of the Renaissance. And we've been speaking about them, but I want to be more explicit and obvious. So characteristics of Renaissance art and architecture is going to be an emphasis on balance and logic and harmony. And in artworks that feature figures, we're going to need to look at gestures or postures. Now I've given you these two shapes or symbols here. The plus sign is simply a balance of opposites. It's what we saw in Bartolomeo, a balance of the vertical with the horizontal. And we're going to see this not only in architecture, but in sculpture and in painting, is anytime we have verticals, we're going to want to balance that with some horizontals. Now the other symbol I've given you is a circle and a square. And this circle and square are going to come into connection much clearer in our next works of art. But I wanted to give you a heads up. So scroll these shapes onto your notepad and write Renaissance characteristics, balance, logic, harmony, and gesture. Got it? Okay.